Okay, now that your pre-processing is done and your micrographs are selected, what you can do is start manually picking. And you don't necessarily have to manually pick a ton of particles. This is also just a useful step to get familiar with your particles if you don't necessarily know the dimensions, and I'll show you how that works. So you have to give it the input file for the micrographs, and in this case, we're just using the selected micrographs from the previous example, but you could use any set of micrographs. And now you can go to the display window, and what you are showing is your expected particle diameter. And you can set this to anything and estimate the size of your particles. So for instance, I could initially set it to 100 if I don't know the maximum diameter of my particles. And then the rest of these these parameters are just dis information that you're giving RELION on how to display the micrographs. The low pass filter filters out all of the higher resolution information and only gives you high contrast information. And then the contrast values can help you uh, show particles more clearly if they're not necessarily clear initially. Typically, I leave these all as default values. Often you have to play with a low pass filter if your particles are very small. So bringing the low pass filter down to, you know, 10 or 5 angstroms or even 0 is sometimes helpful. So right off the bat, we'll just look at micrographs with these parameters, and we'll see if we need to go back and adjust, which is an option. So you can pick any of these just to look at a few of the micrographs, and once you press pick, another window will come up that shows you your micrograph. And here we are, and you can see all of our particles here. And again, we didn't know what the size of these particles would be initially. So if we click on it, we'll get a diameter of 100 angstroms. And we can see that our particles are a little bit bigger than 100 angstroms. So we could continue and pick these because all you're doing is picking coordinates in these micrographs essentially. Or we could go back and close out of this and this window as well and just start a new job. We can uh, try again with a larger diameter. We'll say 250 and run that again. And you can do this as many times as you'd like until you're happy with the results. So we'll go back down to that bottom micrograph again just to get the same result. And here it is. And there's our circle size of 250. So our particle is probably closer to about 200 angstroms across in diameter because this is 250. 100 was too small, 250 is a little bit too big. You can continue to pick those manually, and you can use those for 2D classes. And to do that, you have to, once you're satisfied with your selections, you can right click and say Save Star with coordinates, and then just move on to the next section. And notice that it doesn't show you the number of uh, picked particles until you select the next group. So you can continue with that until you're happy with the number of particles that you've picked. This can be pretty exhaustive, and I tend not to do it unless the particles are very hard to discern or I need to pick a particular orientation. Okay, and I'm not going to do all of these. I'm just showing you how to do it. And you also want to stay away from the edges. So if you just pick particles in the middle, and you don't want to pick any that are overlapping because that will show up as an error in your class averages. Okay, and then once you're happy with all of the particles you've picked, you can exit out and just remember the the job number. I tend not to label these because I often do many different iterations of manual picking and it can slow you down a little bit. So that's manual picking. And next we'll move on to auto picking.